They told us the fortress didn't exist. On every map, it was nothing. No coordinates, no entry in the orders, not even a photograph buried in the archives. But on the cold morning of October 17, 1943, I was standing at its gates, boots sinking into black mud that clung like tar. The air reeked of oil and rusted steel, though not a single shot had been fired. They said it was a routine patrol, just another sweep along a forgotten ridge. But I knew better. The way our lieutenant kept glancing at his watch, the silence that hung between our steps, it all told a different story. Ahead of us, the fortress loomed out of the fog like a half-buried titan, a structure built to be erased. Its walls weren't the clean stone of castles I'd seen in books as a boy. These were jagged slabs of concrete patched with plates of scarred metal, marked by something older than the war itself. Even the crows avoided the barbed wire coiled over the trench. Yet under my boots, the ground thrummed faintly, as if something deep within those walls still breathed. We were 8 men that morning, no jokes, no chatter. Just the sound of our gear and the weight of knowing we were walking toward a place the world had chosen to forget. The gate groaned open without resistance. No lock, no chain, only a heavy push and the deep moan of metal surrendering to air for the first time in years. The sound carried through the fog like a wounded animal. Beyond it lay a yard drowned in silence, stone and steel sleeping under a skin of frost. I stepped through first, rifle ready, breath clouding in front of me. The air inside was colder, thick with the smell of damp fuel and stone that had forgotten sunlight. We were 8 men walking into a place the army swore was never built. Boots sank into gravel that hadn't been disturbed in months. The walls rose on all sides, massive, jagged, patched with plates of corroded iron that caught what little light there was. No birds, no echoes. Even the wind seemed unwilling to follow us inside. "Looks dead," Corporal Hensley muttered, squinting toward the main structure at the center of the yard. His voice came out too loud, breaking the fragile stillness. "Probably rats guarding the place." No one laughed. The lieutenant shot him a look sharp enough to cut through the fog, and Hensley's mouth snapped shut. But once doubt is spoken, it doesn't vanish. It lingers, crawling into the silence between footsteps. That's when I felt it. A vibration beneath the soles of my boots, faint but steady, like the ground itself was breathing. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't thunder, it was deeper, mechanical, alive. "Power," Sergeant Keene whispered. "In a fortress that doesn't exist," I answered before I could stop myself. The lieutenant gave the order to advance. We moved in formation toward the steel door at the base of the central structure. It stood slightly ajar, exhaling a draft of air colder than the morning. Moisture clung to the handle like sweat. I hesitated, hand hovering an inch away, feeling the chill radiate off the metal. Something about it felt wrong. Not dangerous yet, but aware. Inside, the corridor sloped downward. Weak bulbs flickered along the ceiling, their glow yellow and sickly. They shouldn't have been working. The hum grew louder, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The sound wasn't constant anymore. It rose and fell in measured intervals, as if the walls were exhaling between beats. The air tasted metallic. My tongue felt thick, my stomach unsteady. Not fear exactly, but the creeping certainty that we had stepped out of the war we knew and into someone else's. We walked for what felt like an hour, though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. The corridor split into 3 passages, one choked with debris, one descending into blackness, one faintly lit and open. The lieutenant led us down the lighted one. Every step took us further from the world above. The hum became a rhythm, steady and low, vibrating through my bones. Then the corridor widened into a chamber. The first thing I noticed wasn't the size of it, but the smell. Old paper and cold metal, like an archive buried alive. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, each marked with strange codes that meant nothing to any of us. In the center stood a large table. Maps were pinned beneath cracked glass, their surfaces yellowed with age. But they weren't maps of any front we'd been briefed on. No towns, no trenches, no borders, just blank fields and heavy black circles drawn over valleys and forests. Hensley let out a low whistle. "What the hell is this place?" No one answered. The lieutenant approached the table, eyes moving over the maps without expression. He looked less like a man studying terrain and more like someone reading a confession. That's when I saw it, a smear of fresh mud on the floor, leading away from the table into another passage. It hadn't dried yet. Someone had been here recently. My chest tightened. The hum underfoot shifted, growing faster for a few seconds, like it could sense we'd noticed. The lieutenant gave a single order: "Secure the room." We fanned out, rifles raised, checking corners and corridors. I tried one of the cabinets, but the drawer was locked tight. Every single one was. Whoever had built this place didn't want its secrets wandering out. Across the chamber, Hensley crouched by the muddy streak. "Less than a day old," he whispered. I didn't ask how he could tell. He'd been a farmer before the war. He knew soil better than most men knew prayer. If someone had been here 24 hours ago, then where were they now? The lights flickered once, a long blink that made the shadows move like something alive. Every man froze, rifles snapping toward nothing. The hum surged again, then steadied. Finally, the lieutenant spoke. "Fan out, work quiet." I nodded and moved along the wall, tracing the strange numbers etched onto the cabinets. Long strings like 1473-4B, meaningless but deliberate. My hand brushed one of the tags. It was warm. At the center table, the lieutenant barked another order. "Copy the maps, every line, every circle." "Sir, we don't have a camera," Keene said. "Then draw." "Orders are orders." I pulled a notebook from my pack and began sketching. My pencil scratched unevenly across the paper. The shaded zones made no sense. No front lines, no enemy territory. Every circle sat squarely over land we already controlled. My stomach twisted. While we worked, Keene found a small stack of folders tucked beneath the table. Most were empty, but a few contained a single page each. He opened one and frowned. "Names," he said quietly. "What kind of names?" I asked. He handed me the sheet. German, French, even a few Russian. None of them soldiers. Farmers, merchants, tailors, civilians. Hensley crossed himself. Why the hell would a place like this keep lists of people who don't matter? No one had an answer. The lieutenant finally spoke, voice low and tight. "We take what we can, then we leave. This place is above our pay grade." His tone wasn't fear, it was restraint. The sound of a man pretending a fire is just smoke. We packed what notes we could, sketched the maps, and moved back toward the corridor. The hum followed us like breath against our necks. By the time we reached the surface, the fog had thinned, but the fortress hadn't lost its weight. The truck still sat half buried in the mud, a carcass that refused to decay. As we regrouped by the gate, Hensley spoke again, voice cracking. "This wasn't a patrol. We weren't supposed to see this." Keene turned on him. "Shut it. He's right," I muttered before I could stop myself. "Those maps weren't enemy ground. And those names." The lieutenant cut me off. "None of this leaves your mouths. Understood?" We all nodded, but the silence that followed wasn't obedience. It was fear learning to live inside us. That night, miles away, I dreamed of the fortress humming beneath the earth, the sound crawling through soil, searching for ears that would never stop hearing it. Back at command 3 days later, the war fell back into its rhythm. The same noise, the same mud, the same taste of rations that felt older than the earth we ate them on. Artillery thumped somewhere far enough away to pretend we were safe. Orders came and went like tides, and no one mentioned the fortress. Not the lieutenant, not the reports. It simply dissolved, the way secrets do when they're too big for paper. But the silence clung to me. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw those maps, the circles, the zones, the names. They weren't fading, they were multiplying in my head, spreading like rot through a wall. One evening, while sorting rations, I caught Keene watching me. He had the same stare soldiers get when they've started counting ghosts. "You still thinking about it?" he asked quietly. "Every day." He nodded once, slow. "Good, means you're not blind yet." I didn't ask what he meant. Some truths in war are only spoken once, and even then, only halfway. 2 weeks passed before the new orders came. Another patrol, different valley, same cold, same faces. The lieutenant read the briefing without looking up. He didn't need to. We all knew how this went. We set out at dawn. The fog followed. By midday, the ridge fell away into low timber, and that's when I saw it, his map. The lieutenant held it open against his knee while we rested. Lines drawn, routes marked, clean and sharp. But in the corner, faint as breath, was a small pencil circle. I knew it instantly. I had drawn that same kind of mark inside the fortress. For a moment, the air seemed to still. The world shrank to that circle, one ghost of graphite that didn't belong. When we started moving again, I couldn't stop watching it. The mark sat there quiet and certain, guiding our boots towards something no one had ordered us to find. I leaned toward Keene during a water break. "You see it?" His eyes followed mine. They hardened. "I see it. You think it's the same?" He didn't answer, just shouldered his pack and walked on. But his silence said enough. The rain came that night, hammering our tarps. The lieutenant gave new directions just before dawn. "Change of route," he said. "We're heading east." No one spoke, but the unease spread through the ranks like a cold fever. East wasn't on the original orders. East was toward that faint little circle. By noon we reached it, another structure rising from the trees, half buried, half forgotten. Not as tall as the first, but built from the same concrete and steel, same patchwork scars. The forest had tried to swallow it, but the metal still showed through the vines like old bones. "This isn't on any chart," one of the younger privates whispered. "No," Keene muttered, "but it's on his." He nodded toward the lieutenant, who stood staring at the doorway as if he recognized it. The order came. "Inside. Move careful." We entered single file. The air was stale but not dead. A faint hum ran through the floor, weaker than before, but still there, like a heartbeat miles away. The corridors were cleaner, wider. Some lights still burned. It was all the same, down to the smallest detail. The filing cabinets, the sealed drawers, the locked steel door that led deeper. Except this time, there was no dust. Someone had been maintaining it. We found the chamber at the heart of the structure. Another table, more maps. These showed different zones drawn farther north, closer to towns we actually knew. One circle sat over the very place we'd been stationed a month earlier. Keene leaned close. "They're tracking us." I shook my head. "No, something else. Something moving across those areas." We both stared, unable to decide which thought was worse. Then came the sound, not the hum, a sharp metallic clang echoing from deeper inside the fortress. We froze. The lieutenant signaled us forward. Rifles raised, nerves strung tight. The air thickened with tension and old dust. My pulse beat against the rifle stock in my hands. The corridor narrowed. At the end stood a half-open door, a sliver of light cutting through the dark. The lieutenant motioned. We stormed in. Empty. A desk, a chair, papers scattered across the floor. But the chair, it was still rocking, like someone had just left it. "Clear," Keene called, voice low and sharp. We fanned out, checking corners. Nothing. But the silence had weight. It felt watched. Keene knelt, grabbing a page from the floor. His face changed. He handed it to me. Not German, not English, not any language I knew. Lines of symbols, maybe words, maybe codes. But at the top was a seal I recognized. Our Army's insignia. My stomach dropped. "How the hell?" The lieutenant snatched the page from my hands, gathered the rest into his pack, and barked, "We're leaving." Now we moved fast, boots slapping against the concrete, breath loud in our ears. By the time we reached the tree line, the air outside felt heavier than before, like the sky knew what we'd seen. Hensley exploded once we stopped. "This isn't right. We're walking into places nobody's supposed to know about, finding papers with our insignia on them and chasing shadows that vanish in front of us. What are we doing out here?" The lieutenant's stare cut him down. "You'll do your duty, Corporal," but his voice cracked, just enough to let the fear show through. That night I couldn't sleep. The rain turned the leaves into whispers, the hum echoing inside my skull. I kept seeing that rocking chair, still moving long after its occupant had vanished. I lay awake until Keene spoke softly beside me. "You know what this means, don't you?" I turned to face him. "Tell me." "It means this isn't about the enemy. It's not about the war we're fighting. These fortresses, these maps, they're part of something else, something older, something we were never supposed to walk into." He was right. I felt it deep in my bones. The war outside, the one of bullets and borders, was only the surface. Something else was moving underneath, shaping it, feeding it, and whether we wanted it or not, we had become part of it. When sleep finally came, it wasn't rest. It was a descent, the kind where every step echoes, and you can't tell if the sound is behind you or ahead. The next morning came with no sun, only that pale, sick light that seeps through mist like it's lost its will to rise. Orders were simple. Move further east. No questions, no explanations. The lieutenant's tone left no room for either. We broke camp in silence. The trees stood too still, the air too thick. Even the crows had stopped their gossip. The mud beneath us sucked at our boots like it didn't want to let us leave. Hours passed with only the rhythm of trudging feet. The forest pressed close, branches low and skeletal. When we finally reached the ridge, the world opened just enough to show the valley below. And what waited there? A convoy, 6 trucks unmarked, crawling along a dirt road that wasn't on any map. The engines were muffled, the movements rehearsed, efficient, disciplined, wrong. We dropped flat, rifles ready. The lieutenant raised his field glass, jaw tightening. "Who the hell are they?" Keene whispered. No insignias, no flags, no numbers. Just blank metal and men in plain coats, their faces shadowed by the tarps they worked beneath. The truck slowed near a farmhouse, half collapsed, forgotten by time. Men jumped down, carrying crates between them. The way they moved was all precision, no chatter. no mistakes. "What do you think's in those crates?" Hensley murmured. "Not food," Keene said. Through my sights, I saw one of them pry open a lid. Inside, something gleamed. Metal tubes, smooth and cold-looking. Not shells, not rifles. Too polished, too careful. They glimmered like bones dressed in steel. The lieutenant's voice came low. "We've seen enough. Pull back." We obeyed, though every step away felt like walking from a riddle you'd never get another chance to solve. 3 days later, we were back at camp, and the world had already rearranged itself to forget. The war hummed along, supply drops, shelling, mess hall gossip, as if the convoy had been nothing but a mirage. But for us, it was carved into the mind. That night, Keene found me by the edge of the trench line, his face pale in the lamplight. "They're moving something through those fortresses," he said quietly. "Those trucks are part of it." "What is it?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. It's not in the reports, and it's not for us to know." I met his eyes. "And if we do know?" He looked past me toward the dark tree line. "Then we don't live long enough to tell it." His words settled like frost. But the war didn't care. A week later, new orders came down. Another patrol, another valley, another faint pencil circle on the lieutenant's map. I knew the pattern now, and I knew we were walking towards something none of us were meant to survive. The younger privates didn't question it. To them, a patrol was a patrol. But I felt the shape of it tightening around us like wire. By dusk, we reached the valley. The land curved inward like a bowl, perfect for hiding something. At the far end, half buried in the slope, stood another bunker. Newer this time, sharper lines. No vines yet. It hadn't been abandoned, it was alive. Smoke drifted from a vent near the roof. The lieutenant raised his hand. "Advance." We moved, rifles high, boots soft on the damp ground. The door, heavy steel, wasn't locked. It opened with a deep metallic sigh. Inside, the hum was stronger. Not a whisper now, but a pulse. The lights glowed steady and white. Someone had been maintaining them. We crept down the main corridor. Then, voices. The lieutenant froze, fist raised. We pressed to the wall. The words were low, distant. Not German, not Russian. A blend of sounds that didn't belong to any language we knew. He motioned forward. We followed, every nerve stretched thin. At the end of the hall, a door stood ajar. A slice of light spilled through, catching dust in the air like drifting ash. The lieutenant nodded once. We moved. Inside, 3 men, around a table. No insignias, no flags, no rank markings. Just plain gray uniforms. On the table, more crates, the same kind from the convoy. One of them lifted a metal tube, careful as a priest handling relics. Another scribbled notes. I couldn't breathe. The lieutenant whispered, "Hold." We stayed still, rifles ready, hearts pounding. Then one of them spoke, a word I recognized. English. Not perfect, but enough. "Delivery tomorrow." Another answered in that same strange tongue. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, he pushed the door wide and stepped in, rifle raised. "Hands where I can see them." We flooded in behind him. The men froze. One reached toward the table, and Keene fired. The report shattered the silence. The man dropped. The others flinched but didn't scream. They simply raised their hands. Calm. Too calm. "Who are you?" the lieutenant barked. No answer. Hensley spat on the floor. "They ain't soldiers." "Bind them," the lieutenant ordered. We tied their wrists with rope, shoved them to the wall. Their faces stayed blank, eyes too steady, too knowing. That calm scared me more than gunfire ever could. We searched the crates, the same tubes stacked and labeled with numbers that meant nothing. None of it standard issue, none of it right. "What are they?" one private muttered. "Fuel? Rockets?" Keene shook his head. "Whatever they are, they're not meant to exist." "Load what we can," the lieutenant said. "Destroy the rest." We did. We carried out what we could, stacked the rest in the yard, set the charges, and blew it all to dust. When the smoke cleared, the 2 bound men were gone. Gone. Ropes still there, cut clean. No footprints, no blood, just empty space. Hensley swore, voice breaking. "Impossible! We had eyes on them." The lieutenant's face went pale. For the first time, I saw real fear there. "We're moving out," he said sharply. We didn't argue. We retreated through the trees, night closing in fast. Every sound felt alive. Every branch, every breath. The forest was full of eyes. We stopped miles away, built no fire. The dark pressed in like a living thing. Keen sat across from me, his face flickering in the faint light of his cigarette. "You know what this means now," he said. I didn't answer. "It means this isn't war anymore," he whispered. "It's something else. Something that started long before us, and it's not done yet." He was right, because that night I could still hear the hum. It followed us, soft, patient, alive, moving through the ground like it was searching for where we'd sleep next.
Before dawn, the lieutenant woke us. His voice was steady but hollow, the kind men use when they've already made peace with what's coming. We formed up outside the tents, rifles slung, breath fogging in the cold. The field smelled of wet clay and smoke. Keen stood beside me, quiet, unreadable. The lieutenant read out the plan: move west to the river, follow it to the rail cut, then loop back. Quick sweep, no delays. His eyes never met ours. They drifted over us like he was counting pieces, not men. We marched through brush and frost, the sun trying to break through clouds and failing. The forest crowded close, heavy with silence. After an hour, we reached the river, brown, fast, flecked with light. We followed it south until the ground narrowed into a trench of chalk and clay. The rail cut. The tracks were gone, the ties stacked like ribs. A single signal mast leaned over, its glass shattered. Nothing lived down there. "Down," the lieutenant said. We slid into the trench. The mud grabbed at our boots. Walls rose high on both sides, trapping sound, air, even thought. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. We moved 2 by 2, rifles up. 50 yards ahead, the cut hooked left. The lieutenant raised his hand. We stopped. Then it came, a metallic scrape on stone, wrong and sharp, not wind, not animal. Keen's fingers brushed my sleeve once. Ready. The lieutenant signaled 2 privates forward. They moved fast, low, silent, until the corner erupted. A burst of gunfire cracked the trench apart. Both men fell before they screamed. The lieutenant dove back as rounds tore chalk into powder over our heads. We dropped to the mud, returning fire toward shapes we couldn't see. "Flank them," the lieutenant shouted. "Too steep," Keen barked. "They've got the high wall." More rounds snapped overhead. Whoever they were, they knew the terrain. They were close, invisible, precise. I glimpsed. At a flash, a muzzle, a shoulder, and fired. The echo ricocheted through the cut like thunder inside a coffin. Another burst came from above. I caught a blur of plain cloth, no insignia. Hensley slid beside me, face white as the chalk we lay in. "Same bastards from the bunker," he hissed. His voice trembled, but not from fear. Rage, raw and shaking. "Move!" the lieutenant yelled. He sprinted low, pulling smoke grenades from his belt. 2 clanked against the wall, hissing into clouds that rolled thick and white. The gunfire thinned, then faltered. "Up, go!" We pushed forward through the smoke, slipping, gasping, firing at flickers of motion. Shapes darted along the slope, 2, maybe 3, then vanished. I shot at a shoulder, saw it jerk back. Keen led from the front, pushing toward the bend. The air turned into paste, breathing hurt. Every heartbeat sounded like footsteps behind me. The smoke cleared just enough to show a throat of open trench ahead. Then a new sound, low, mechanical, rising fast. An engine, heavy, close. "Truck," Keen said. "Not ours," I answered. Its growl swelled until the ground shook. A shadow rolled across the far end of the cut, a grill gleaming clean through the mud, tires thick with military treads. No markings, no flag. Familiar and wrong all at once. "Down!" I shouted. The truck dropped off the slope, grinding into the trench. A gunner rose from the bed, not with a mounted heavy, but something smaller, stranger. A weapon that sang instead of barked. The sound was flat, slicing the air. The walls exploded in white chalk dust. Splinters of wood and stone spun like shrapnel. A man screamed. Keen returned fire in short, precise bursts, aiming for the gunner's head. The figure dropped, then reappeared a few feet away. I fired 3 rounds, saw the spray, saw him vanish again. The truck kept crawling forward, pushing mud in waves. Men jumped from the sides, moving in silence, coordinated, too calm. The lieutenant broke cover and ran toward the driver's door. At first, I thought he'd lost his mind, charging straight into the line of fire. But then I saw it. The driver didn't aim at him. He leaned out and opened the door. The lieutenant grabbed the handle, swung himself up, and fired 3 shots into the passenger seat. He wasn't stopping the truck. He was taking it. Keen's voice tore through the noise. "Hold position!" But my body moved before my brain caught up. I ran after the lieutenant. The driver's arm came up with a pistol. I fired once. The gun flew from his hand. The lieutenant turned on the step, his pistol leveled at my chest. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Keen's rifle cracked. The lieutenant's shoulder snapped back. He fell from the step into the mud, rolled once, tried to rise, failed. The truck sputtered and died. Silence came like a wave hitting stone, total, crushing. Hensley fired twice more at figures scrambling up the slope. They vanished into the trees, gone before we could chase. The trench stank of smoke and blood and wet earth. The lieutenant knelt in the mud, hand pressed to his shoulder, eyes empty but calm. "It was never your road," he said softly. "Whose then?" I asked. He tried to smile but couldn't. "Not yours." Keen strode over, ripped the map case from the lieutenant's shoulder and tossed it to me. "Open it." My fingers shook as I worked the straps. Inside were papers stamped with symbols I didn't recognize, signatures that looked like claw marks, and a small oilcloth notebook. The first page listed sites, circles beside each one drawn by the same hand that had marked his maps. The next page froze my blood. A roster of names, ours, Hensley, Keen, me, each followed by a date. No ranks, no units, just the inevitability of ink. "What is this?" I whispered. "T." The lieutenant looked at the ground. "Clearance windows," he said. "For what?" "So no one sees who's passing through." A tremor rippled through me. Not fear, not yet, but the recognition that the war we'd been fighting wasn't the only one being kept alive. Behind us, the smoke from the truck drifted upward, pale and slow, like something exhaling relief. And for the first time, I wondered if the fortress had ever been a place at all, or if it had been waiting, patient and quiet, for us to finally take the road we were never meant to walk. The lieutenant sat in the mud, his blood leaking dark through the fabric of his sleeve. Steam rose off it, vanishing into the mist. His face was pale but calm, like a man who had already given away everything that mattered. Keen stood over him, rifle low but ready, eyes unreadable. "What are these?" I asked, holding the pages from his map case. The air around us was thick with gun smoke and something else. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of stillness that follows a storm but feels worse than the thunder itself. The lieutenant's gaze flicked toward the wrecked truck, then back to me. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he said. "Try me," I snapped. He took a shallow breath, every word dripping like blood. "They're not weapons, not the way you think. The crates, the tubes, the convoys, they're moving pieces, parts of something that doesn't end with this war." His voice trembled, just barely. This wins the next one before it starts." Hensley swore under his breath, his face hollow. "What the hell does that mean?" The lieutenant didn't answer. He just looked at us the way a dying man looks at the living, almost sorry. "You can radio this," he said softly. "Tell command everything. Hand over those papers, that book. They'll take it, rewrite it, bury it, and you'll go missing on the way home. Or," he coughed hard, a spatter of red hitting his collar, "or you burn the rest, keep the book, and walk away while you still can." "Why us?" I asked. "Why any of this?" He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Because the fortress didn't exist, and you kept walking anyway." Behind him, smoke still curled from the wrecked truck, painting the trench walls black. Keen moved closer, his boots sinking into the wet chalk. "Another convoy's coming," the lieutenant said. "An hour, maybe less. If they find us here, no one writes the ending." Keen's jaw tightened. "Then we finish it first." We tripped what we could from the truck, maps from the glove box, a tin stamped with a symbol none of us recognized, a coiled cable, a hand lamp that flicked to life with a pale, cold light. The rest we stacked. Crates, tarps, spare fuel. Hensley worked the charges with mechanical precision, his hands steady for the first time since I'd known him. I kept the oilcloth book close. pressed against my chest beneath my jacket. It felt alive, a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. When the fuses were ready, I looked at the lieutenant. His eyes were glassy, but he was still aware. I handed him a canteen. He drank like it hurt. "You'll need a head start," he said, voice low. "When the next convoy reaches this cut, they'll find wreckage. They'll mark it as an accident. They'll close the book on this place." Keen raised his palm, a silent signal. I nodded, thumbed the detonator. The explosion rolled through the trench like a collapsing lung. The truck lifted, flipped sideways, then came down in fire. The air turned white and red at once, chalk and heat and thunder. The earth shook. For a heartbeat, it felt like the world had cracked open. When the smoke thinned, we climbed out of the cut using a narrow goat path that clawed at our boots. At the top, the trees stood like witnesses, still and waiting. No sound of pursuit yet, just wind through the branches and the echo of what we'd done. "Which way?" Hensley asked. "North," Keen said. "Through the woods. No roads." The lieutenant stumbled behind us, pale and breathing hard. "Can you walk?" I asked. He gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I can until I can't." We moved in single file, the forest closing around us, muffling our steps. The air smelled of pine and smoke and wet soil. The lieutenant faltered once, then again. At the edge of a ravine, he stopped, turned to look back the way we'd come. His face had gone gray. "You just ruined a schedule that wasn't meant to slip," he said. "Good," Hensley muttered. The fortress seemed to breathe with us. Each vibration through the walls felt like a slow heartbeat, steady and ancient, pulsing through the stone. The lieutenant sat slumped at the table, his face pale but eyes alert. Outside, a faint rumble grew, engines moving closer, men searching the ridge. We could hear them before we could see them, their movements organized, deliberate. Keen turned down the lamp until it was barely a glimmer. The room sank into a ghost light, all edges and shadow. The lieutenant's voice came out rough, threaded with pain. "They'll sweep the slope first, then the main gate. They always do." "Always?" Hensley asked, his hands still stained from stitching the wound. The lieutenant gave a weary smile. "Because I told them to." The air thickened, heavy as wet wool. Somewhere deep below us, a machine hummed awake, echoing through the vents. The hum wasn't random anymore. It moved in rhythm, rising and falling like a code. I could feel it in my ribs, a tremor that didn't stop when the sound did. Keen stepped toward the hall. "We can't hold if they come down. Options? There's a service exit," the lieutenant said, pointing weakly toward the rear wall. "Narrow, rusted, but it opens into a dry ditch that runs along the ridge." "Show us," Keen said. The lieutenant nodded, then looked at me. "Pull that lever on the junction panel first." I found the switch under a layer of dust. Its tag read EMR Run in faded paint. I pulled. Somewhere deeper, turbines spun up, roaring to life. The walls shook. Then a siren wailed through the vents, one long metallic scream that turned the air to glass. "What did you do?" Hensley shouted. "Gave them another story," I said. "If they hear the siren, maybe they think we're buried too deep to flush. Maybe they'll mark the place hot and move on." The lieutenant nodded faintly. "That's what I'd do." We killed the lights and motes, ved through the corridors by the hand lamp's thin beam. The walls sweated moisture that ran down in tiny streams. Every footstep echoed longer than it should have, as if something further down was walking in time with us. The fortress felt awake now, not angry, not alive, but aware. At the service door, rust held the hinges like bones locked in old scars. Keen braced himself and drove his shoulder against it. The sound of the metal breaking was deafening. For a moment we froze, expecting the echo to bring the whole ridge down on us. It didn't. The door gave way, coughing dust into our faces. Beyond it, the ditch stretched narrow and deep, lined with brambles and slick stone. We moved low, the lieutenant half carried between us, Hensley supporting most of his weight. Above, the night hung heavy, the sky close and gray like the inside of a helmet. Voices drifted faintly through the trees, measured, calm, men working methodically. Then a whistle. 2 short peeps, one long. Another answered from somewhere beyond the ridge. "Not ours," Keen whispered. We slid farther down the ditch until the fortress disappeared behind the curve of earth. Through the brush ahead, I saw them, 4 figures at the main gate, plain coats, unhurried. One held a paper pointed toward the ground. 2 others placed something by the wall and stepped back. A small flash bloomed, followed by smoke. For a second, I thought they'd planted a charge to bury us. But the explosion was soft. A signal, not a kill. They weren't destroying the fortress. They were recording it. Proof for a file somewhere. They're filing a memory, Keen murmured. Paper that says they worked, I said. We kept moving, every step dragging through mud that sucked at our boots. The ditch ended beneath a low rock shelf. Beyond it, a stand of pines waited, dark and silent. We crossed into their cover, breath coming in shallow bursts. The engines above revved once more, then faded. The siren still howled faintly behind us, stretching long and mournful until it sounded almost human. When we finally stopped, it was in a hollow cut by rainwater, the kind of place light never really reaches. We drank from a small stream, washed the blood from the lieutenant's wound. The water ran pink for a moment, then clear again. I set the oilcloth book on a rock. The surface pulsed under my palm, faintly warm. We can't carry all this in our heads, Keen said. We need to decide what lives and what dies. What do you mean? Hensley asked. I mean what goes in the report, Keen said. And what disappears? The lieutenant looked at the book, then at me. If you hand it up the chain, it vanishes forever. If you burn it, you erase the truth you'll need later. But if you hide it, he paused, breathing shallow, then you become the thing they fear most. What's that? I asked. A witness who learned to keep his own ledger. The words hung there, heavy as the fog. A gust of wind stirred the trees, leaves rustled like paper turning. I felt the hum still faint beneath us, running through the soil like current. Keen finally broke the silence. We say it was an enemy ambush at the rail cut. We say we destroyed an unmarked convoy. Our officer wounded but stable, could not pursue. Hensley nodded slowly. Simple, clean. The lieutenant exhaled, eyes closing. If they ask, you found crates of spare parts. If they press, you say the blast took it all. You never mention hands without flags. You never say the word fortress. And if they ask where you were, he smiled faintly. You tell them fog. We packed the gear and moved at dusk. Night fell fast, merciful. The forest became a black ocean, trees like drowned masts. We walked until the siren's echo faded completely. When it was gone, I almost missed it. Because the silence that replaced it wasn't peace. It was the sound of something waiting for its story to be finished. We reached our own lines before dawn, the world gray and dripping with rain. The sentry at the wire nearly fired before he saw our faces. His eyes went wide, disbelief chasing across them like lightning. We thought you were gone, he said quietly, lowering his rifle. Welcome back. His voice carried the weight of a eulogy. Inside the perimeter, everything felt smaller, more fragile, like we'd come back from a place the air itself refused to follow. A medic patched the lieutenant's arm, cursed the field stitch, then admitted it would hold. He tagged him for the aid station and asked for forms. Keen filled them out slow, neat, like he was writing an epitaph that needed to sound ordinary. When the report was read aloud, it played like a sermon from the Church of Lies. Enemy ambush at the rail cut, moderate fire, 2 killed, 1 wounded, unmarked supply destroyed. No mention of the men without insignias. No mention of fortresses or circles on maps or the hum that crawled beneath our bones. It looked clean. It even sounded clean. The oilcloth book never left my body. I kept it wrapped against my chest where I could feel it with every breath. When sleep came, it wasn't sleep at all. It was falling into a black pit where engines hummed below the earth and voices whispered in a dozen languages, all saying the same word. Quiet. Morning came in the usual way. Mud, orders, the smell of burnt coffee pretending to be normal. Keen sat outside the tent smoking something half dead, the stub shaking between his fingers. He didn't look up when he passed me a tin cup. They moved Hensley, he said. Logistics unit, up the road. His voice was flat, emptied of surprise. You? I asked. New sector, east, 3 ridges over. He looked at the horizon as if trying to see through it. And the lieutenant? I asked. Keen blew out smoke. Rear station, he said. Or that's what they said. B. Evening, rumor had already rewritten us. Some said our patrol had been ambushed by deserters. Others claimed we'd stumbled on a German spy nest. A few swore there'd been no patrol at all. Each story contradicted the next, and that was the point. If everyone holds a different piece, no one gets the whole. Before we left for reassignment, a runner brought an envelope. No seal, no signature, just my name in plain block letters. Inside, a single card. One line, written in a careful hand I didn't know. Stay off the corridors. I folded it twice and slipped it deep into my pocket. Keen saw me do it but didn't ask. Some things don't need questions. They just wait to become nightmares later. The next few days blurred. We marched east through rain that turned the trenches into veins of mud. Men joked, cursed, smoked, pretended the war was still the same. But I could feel the weight of that book pressing against my ribs like an anchor made of words. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I'd take it out under the tent light. The pages smelled of metal and dust. I copied 3 entries into my own notebook. Routes, dates, a few of the strange phrases. Transit complete. Witness risk contained. Quiet corridors active. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew enough to fear the parts I understood. Hensley's letter came a week later, 3 lines in his crooked handwriting. Still alive. Still hungry. Still seeing things I shouldn't. Burn this. I read it twice and fed it to the trench stove, watched the edges curl to ash. The flame made the words dance before it ate them whole. The lieutenant vanished into the noise of the war. No name on the casualty lists, no promotion, no transfer log, nothing. He'd been swallowed the same way the fortresses had, erased with precision. But sometimes, when the wind carried just right, I thought I could still hear his voice saying, "You moved a storm." Months passed. The war ground itself to a stop not with victory but exhaustion. When it ended, the world didn't celebrate, it just exhaled. The guns went quiet. The sky didn't change. We were told to go home and forget the things we'd seen. Some men did. I couldn't. Years later, I still heard the hum. Low, patient, familiar. Sometimes it came from the earth beneath my floorboards. Sometimes it came from my chest when I couldn't sleep. I kept the oilcloth book locked in a trunk under my bed, wrapped in canvas. The pages had dried, but the ink still pulsed faintly, like veins under skin. I told myself I'd burn it someday. I never did. Now and then, I'd open it, just to see if the words had changed. They hadn't. But the air around me always felt different after I closed it. Denser, charged, like the world had adjusted itself slightly to make room for what was still unfinished. I never told anyone outside our squad what happened. The report stayed clean. The record stayed quiet. But sometimes I think about the next man who'll find that book. Maybe a soldier, maybe a historian, maybe just someone curious enough to dig where no one's supposed to. Maybe he'll read it, feel the hum, and realize what we did. That wars aren't just fought over land or borders, but over the things buried underneath them. And when people ask me where I fought, I don't name the ridge or the valley. I don't mention battles or medals. I just tell them this. I was there the day the enemy lost the fight at the Forgotten Fortress, and the day I learned the war we were told about was only half the truth. Sometimes they laugh, thinking it's just an old soldier's tale. But when the night goes quiet enough, when even the wind forgets how to move, I swear I still hear it. The hum, steady and alive, echoing through the corridors that were never supposed to exist. And that's how I know the fortress was never gone. It just went quiet.
Some roads never end. They just go quiet. The fortress may be buried, the maps erased, the names forgotten, but the hum still moves beneath the ground, patient as breath. If you've made it this far, you've already stepped onto that road. You've heard what wasn't meant to be heard. And once you hear it, it never really stops. So before the silence finds you again, stay with us. There are more stories waiting in the dark, more corridors to walk through, more truths that were never supposed to surface. Subscribe now, before the next one wakes.